Hi, Shaheen. Welcome to the Circle.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So happy to have you here. We had to wait a little while. You've been traveling through Europe, having some fun there.
Yes, I've been gallivanting.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, we met through our mutual friend, Christopher Valencia. And I have to tell the story because you were a major part of the inspiration for my podcast.
Oh, my.
Okay. I think I might have told you. So when Christopher, he knew that I'm a fan. And when I heard that he knew you, I was like, introduce me. I want to meet Shaheen. And he said, oh, okay. Yeah, I talked to Shaheen and I told him that you want to meet him. And here's his phone number. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm finally going to meet this man that I've looked up to for so many years. I mean, I'm such a fan of your work. And I was like, I have nothing going on. What am I going to talk to him about?
Oh, geez.
And I decided that I was going to just see if I could get lunch with you and really pick your brain for what's coming because you're really known to be a visionary and a trendsetter. And I thought maybe I can get some clues from Shaheen about what I should be doing next. And I'm telling my girlfriend this, and she said, oh, would you record that conversation? In fact, just put it in a podcast.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
And that's how this whole Delphine Circle came about. So even though you are not my first guest, you are the inspiration.
Oh, my. That's terrific. Thanks. Yeah. I'm glad to know that.
So happy to have you.
Thank you.
So for a little more formal introduction, for people who might not have stalked you the way I have, President and CEO of Lab Holding. You are a real estate developer in retail and multi-use communities, most notable for the Lab, the Camp, Sobeca Arts District in Costa Mesa, as well as the revitalization of downtown Anaheim, the Center Street Promenade, and the Packing District, which includes the Packing House, the Packard Building, Farmers Park, and Make Project, as well as the new Modern Times Leisure Town.
Nice.
Fun stuff that you've been working on. Those are some huge undertakings. You don't take small projects on.
Well, it sounds like you've done your homework. So
a little bit.
Well, I don't know if we necessarily select projects based on size. I suppose we do in some ways, but I think we learned this is our 30th year in business and we just need a bigger canvas in order to be able to really execute on the vision and create the authenticity. It's just hard to do what we do on a smaller platform.
Well, because you always build in kind of a community feel, or at least the projects that I'm familiar with you. Is there a reason for that? Do you feel like it has to be kind of brought together as a community?
Well, I do. Yeah. I think it's, it's just all about being able to communicate. It's just like writing a song, it's just hard to just put a couple notes down and, and be able to really communicate the feel of the song. So I think we just need enough sort of runway to really present, what the vision is.
Well, you're currently in development on projects in Garden Grove, Corona, San Marcos, Long Beach, in addition to the 46 projects that your company owns and operates. Do you ever see a time when you're going to say, that's it, I'm done, or are you just feeling like you're ramping up?
I don't feel like I'm ramping up. No, I actually, I think, I'm very much aware of the calendar. I'm in my late 60s now. So I have enjoyed tremendously. This is technically my second career in terms of what I do. But I think what I really let happen is it's an organic process. I mean, I think if we come up with an idea that we are convinced that it's authentic and it's a way of life that we see coming down the pike in the future, then for me, it's exciting to be able to put it together.
Yeah.
And I think every one of the projects we've completed, they've all really had a purpose or a reason. We don't necessarily put these projects together based on a balance sheet and an income statement. I think we have what we have in our performa is sort of the cultural aspects of it. And I just know that if we do it well and if we deliver on the vision, they have done well financially.
Yeah.
But I think it's just being true to the vision and really feeling like, what do people want? And what are they, where are things going? I'm really interested in that.
Well, it's interesting you would use the word authentic because that's kind of my word of the year. I love authenticity, and it's something I try to incorporate into my daily practice of constantly trying to believe see if I'm being authentic as I possibly can. But I haven't heard that term used for development. So what does authenticity mean in a development sense?
Well, it's sort of an in-depth word, to be honest. It's, and I think for me to share that with you, I unfortunately have to give you a little bit of history.
I love history.
So it's not a quick answer. I think the general belief within me is the fact that, I'm a history buff in a sense. And my family moved to America in 1965, and my parents came here to get their doctorates, and I was 11 years old, and I didn't speak any English. But I grew up in the Midwest, and where I lived not far outside of Detroit, and where it was the auto manufacturing of the world, and I sensed even as a kid during the 60s, sort of America became this manufacturing powerhouse, and we were the masters of fast everything, fast food, and mass production. And America, if you needed goods and services, it came from America, whether it was a refrigerator or an automobile. And I think that's where we began to build the most powerful middle class in the history of mankind. And through this process, all of our goods and services became very homogenized. And I remember even as a kid, our instrument of measure for success was, does it have legs? In other words, if you're just a badass local restaurant, it's like, it's just a local restaurant, But if you had the ability to roll it through Michigan and Ohio and Indiana and, of course, California, then you were really a success story. And I think everything was based on mass. Yeah. And our hotels were that. I remember as a kid, if we traveled, we all stayed at a Holiday Inn or a Howard Johnson's or something. You ate, you went to McDonald's or Burger King, And really just punching, 60 years later, but technically it's taken us almost 300 years to get here. I am absolutely fascinated and just, the opportunity of what's happened in America with this next generation, I'm going to call them. And I want to be careful with that because it's really less about age, but it's just how we've had this cultural shift that has been going on. And today, I always say, and I like to simplify things, it's, the mass is not happening. At some point, the value for mass went down and the value for what I call personalization, customization, and localization has risen tremendously. So I think we have finally arrived at this place where there's so much more appreciation and we're so much more selective. And at the same token, I promise you that every CEO of every national change around this country is in a boardroom trying to figure out what to do next because the fact of the matter is nobody, I believe, is personal opinion, but I don't think anybody gets excited about having another Denny's in their backyard or a macaroni grill or a Applebee's. And so a lot of these chains that many of us grew up with, I just think there's an interesting shift that's going on. And I look at all of this as opportunity.
Yeah. Well, you've been looking at it like that for a while now because yes. I believe the lab opened in 1993.
We opened in 93, yes.
Yeah. And that was basically the concept of the lab, right? Which is smaller, more kind of smaller business, more local business, bringing people together in a way that they could actually maybe meet the people who are behind the stores and the manufacturers. Mm-hmm. And it was a huge success. I mean, internationally acclaimed, still there, still operating, still successful. And then the camp. I mean, the camp really was one of the first to in my opinion, maybe there was others, but the first that I saw that had really embraced the whole eco movement and the green movement in 2003, when very few people were talking about anything like that. So you actually walk the walk. It's proven to be successful for you. So obviously it was relevant then, and you see that it's still being relevant today.
I do. I think, at least for me, but I know many people that are passionate about what they do, you sort of do what you believe in. Again, I think our decisions have always been driven by culture and not necessarily a balance sheet. And culturally, I believe, especially growing up in Michigan, in the Midwest, that small businesses in America is what built our economy. And we tend to take these small businesses and then make them so big that they get goofy. And in some ways, they really naturally lose touch with the consumer or the end user because they're so big. And the notion of the challenge is, how do you become big and keep the cool?
Yeah.
And it's a very difficult thing to do because in most cases, you end up maybe being a public company because that's sort of the dream, right? And then it really becomes about the shareholders and the quarter growth. And, I think if one really sits down and does the math, and as an example, if you're running a $2 billion company and, if you want to be the darling of Wall Street, I think they're looking for 15 to 20% growth. And so that's on a $2 billion company. It's you have to grow $400 million a year. That's $100 million a quarter. And that's basically over $1 million a day. So every day you wake up and you shower and you go to work, you got to put $1 million to the bottom line. And that's just a $2 billion company, which is, I think the scale of things have really changed, but imagine running a $10 billion company.
We had this conversation with Doug Palladini, our guest who's the president of Vans.
Yeah.
And he spoke very precisely on the ways that they try to do that, because Vans has actually done an incredibly great job at that. And he says it's really about the interaction, the touching of their customers, right? And their experiences, which is why Vans is so experiential as a brand.
Well, I spent 10 years of my early careers with VF Corporation. So he works for an amazing company and he's a very smart guy. So I agree with him. And that's the challenge, how do you maintain big and small at the same time? And so otherwise, again, it becomes a shareholder's experience, and executives under pressure make goofy decisions, and they're basically short-term bottom line, but long-term it affects the company culture and the brand and the product and so forth. But I think without going further on that, I always believe small businesses, and even today, 30 years later, I still think all the excitement and the passion comes from small businesses. And I'm not trying to be rude, but, I don't know anybody that's in love with AT&T or Bank of America or, I think when they get too big, they get goofy and they lose touch, the human touch. So when I looked at the sort of the landscape back in the 90s, and especially when I was involved with Quiksilver, I realized there's really no place for all of these small companies to congregate, because what we had, let's just say across America, we had malls. In Orange County, we had malls and strip centers. And I think a lot of these brands didn't want to be in a mall. Well, first of all, they couldn't afford it, and they didn't want to go sign a 20-year lease, but then they didn't want to be next to a Gap either, because I think it just, there was an awareness of brand culture. And at the same time, they didn't want to be in a strip center next to 7-Eleven and a dog grooming shop, because their brand has a greater cultural value than that. So I think for me, I saw an opportunity where, what if we just create this platform and bring all of the cool small people together? And that's really, it was as simple as that. And then I think...
And yet you don't have, I don't know that I see any of the major action sports brands world that you came from actually in your centers, though.
Well, we did. Originally we did, but as you're aware, that industry has also changed. And I think that industry also fell into the same model that I was sharing with you. I think they just got so big, and it was very difficult, particularly for the public brands, maintain their cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and it gets complicated. I mean, there's distribution issues and other issues as well. So we named our company, the Lab, stands for Little American Businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I believe in it. I think it's more apropos today, especially with this revival of the makers market in America. And, we're back making stuff again. People are knitting and people are making backpacks and people are making guitars and people are making furniture. And, there's something really exciting about that. And it's, penetrated, into our food business as well, which is, for me, it's very, very exciting. I mean, this whole idea, we've done 6 breweries thus far, but, the breweries we're finally catching up with the UK, where, every neighborhood has a pub and it's the community center.
Mm-hmm.
And the neighbors congregate each evening and have a pint,
Mm-hmm.
And we've never had a place where we could just go have a pint. And I think these breweries are filling that void. So I think there's a lot of exciting things, and there's layers to it. As an example, when I grew up, we went to, Safeway or someplace, and we bought a 12-pack of, Stroh's beer is what we had in Michigan, and then you take it to your buddy's house and you watch the game, right?
Yeah.
And then today, that's not the way it is. I think people want to talk to the brewmaster, and talk to me about why are you brewing this, and what's the flavor, and products need conversation. It's not about just straight up consumption.
Yeah.
And we were on the straight up consumption for a long time. So for me to see this shift of consuming things that are important to us and having the conversation, it's the same thing with the coffee business. I grew up, my family had, 25-cent, I won't name the brand, coffee, but today, people want to talk about the beans and where did it come from? And did you take care of the people, the farmers that are, picking the, it's just amazing. And that to me is massive opportunity for humanity and massive opportunity. Things are definitely more human touch, people oriented. And I don't really see that go away.
But we hear about this whole, the middle class disappearing, right? That everything's going to Amazon now, and that we're really seeing a void occurring in what we consider the small boutiques are closing because they can't compete with the department stores. So is this an effort to try to make an impact on that trend, or are you thinking that, this is going to just be a niche industry, or what are your thoughts about what we hear about how that middle class is going away and how retail is dying?
Well, this is a big country, and over time, we certainly saw that during our presidential elections, as opposed to looking at the entire company, the entire country as everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants to get a McDonald's burger. We're going to sell it in Ohio, and then we're going to sell it in California, and then we're going to take it to Hawaii, and then, as a matter of fact, we'll take it around the world. I think that mentality has to change. Same thing with department stores. As you know, I was in that industry for many years. So originally there was buyers out in New York, and then eventually most of the big department store owners ended up moving to Ohio. So they're sitting in Ohio and they're buying same product, and they would ship it to California and then to Florida. Well, that customer, whether they were surfers or golfers or what have you, casual wear, they didn't wear the same stuff. I mean, clearly, because I was in the golf business for many years, people down south wanted Kelly green pants. I don't know anybody in California that wore a Kelly green pants.
Right.
You don't look right on the golf course in California. Yeah. But it took
Nantucket red.
But it took many years, I think, for us to understand there are, within our country, there's a lot of cultural differences. Mm-hmm. So I think when I talk about localization, personalization, customization, I think that's really just sort of risen from that. And I think by nature, department stores and this mass buying have had to change. Number one, I think there's layers of problems. The country's been over-retailed for many, many years. the idea of people going into one place to buy all of their goods it's obsolete. Idea of a mall. Again, I grew up in Michigan. The malls replaced the old dilapidated downtowns, and the weather elements are pretty severe both in the summertime and in the wintertime. And these were these air conditioned and heated boxes that everybody congregated to. I think we in America, unfortunately, still had this mentality that the guy goes to work and the mom is a mom, and the moms, took a stroller into the mall, and and the dad would go to work, but moms aren't like that anymore. We have this massively powerful woman generation that finally has been allowed to just, rise up. Most women that I know today don't just go walk around the mall just to burn time. I think it's just, so I think they were designed, perhaps it was the right thing for the time, but I think the world has changed. I can get into a lot of, sort of background proof of that. And so it all has to get retooled, is what I'm saying. Now, and then I want to just comment on your Amazon. Look, we still, this country still, we're 25%, we're 4.5% of the world population, and we consume 25% of the goods and services. Wow. So if we were in the Olympics, we'd for sure get the gold medal for consumption. So it's still going on, and we're still buying a lot of junk, and we still take big carts and, ride them around Walmart and buy things we don't need. But it's changing, and it's geographically, as our intellect level and education system, and we become more global, it's changing. And for sure, this next generation of consumers, including my kids who are in their 20s, they buy different, and they, and the proof of that, and I've said this before, I think we have people making $15 an hour, but they'll spend $6 on a cup of coffee. Because the mentality is like, if I'm going to drink coffee, I want some damn good stuff. Yeah. And with people that are, maybe have the higher income, maybe they're eating less meat. But if I'm going to go have a steak, I want a really good steak, and I'll pay $50 for it. Yeah. And, so I think it's all starting to just change in a sense, So my view of Amazon, which I think is just an incredible phenomenal, and, I have just so much respect. I don't care what people say about Jeff Bezos, but is what he's done. But, it's the instrument that moves commodity around. In other words, it's a great place to buy all your basic stuff. Of course, you can buy more, but, why drive into the grocery store and, to buy a big pack of toilet paper, park your car?
I don't feel bad because it definitely replaced Costco in my world.
Yeah.
I don't go to Costco anymore. I just have all that stuff shipped through Amazon.
Yeah. But I think if you're buying personal stuff, you can't drink coffee on Amazon. You can't get a haircut on Amazon. You can't have a beautiful dinner and conversation with your friends on Amazon. Mm-hmm. You can't go to a spa on Amazon. You can't. So I think what's happened is what's commodity falls under Amazon. So it becomes we spend less time going to the grocery store or wherever, I mean, I haven't walked into Home Depot for a very long time because, if I really need some nails for the house, I just go on Amazon. It's not worth my time to get in my car and go park and worry about my car getting dinged with a big cart and waiting. It just doesn't make sense, So I think there's a lot of practical applications to it. But it's not necessarily replacing our needs as human beings in terms of the things. It's allowing us more time to do things that we actually enjoy.
Yeah. How do you think the 2020 experience impacted that way of thinking?
Well, you're referring to the COVID. This is a very weird thing for me to say, but I think there's so much to be learned from it, and lots of good things happen. I mean, I think it's easy to say all of the bad that happened, and of course, I'm going to be very respectful because, I know people that lost families, and it's devastating. Yeah. But
there's a lot of learning that came out of it.
It basically told the world to get off the freeway and look at a map. And it was that moment of pause that we all needed to really recalibrate what's important to us. And for some people, it might be more time with my kids, or more time with my mom, or more time with friends. For others, it would be life is short. I'm not going to kill myself working. For others, it could be, I don't need all this stuff. Mm-hmm. I can live simpler. So there's so many layers of emotional experiences that I believe are going to be to the positive.
Yeah, huge and environmentally positive impacts.
Absolutely. Yeah, there was a lot. There's a lot that, and then you just wonder, like, I'm not particularly religious, but I just wonder, like, there's a reason. I always think there was a reason for everything, but and as bummed out I am, obviously every one of my businesses got closed, so I can't be excited about that. But I do know there's a lot of good stuff that will come out of it, and that it will change our behavior.
I love that. I love that you're so positive. You make me happy because I believe everything you say.
We didn't have a choice. We didn't have a choice, did we?
But you still have a very positive outlook, and I absolutely want to believe everything you say, because I think that's the right way to go. And you said just a second ago, you said, I believe everything happens for a reason. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think, just throughout history and just watching the world go by, we can't control it. Mm-hmm. We can't control it all. I always wonder, how much can we really control, And I think, if we really get into the nuts and bolts of control, that's probably the biggest issue that we have as human beings. It's, again, I can talk a lot about this because it affects our happiness. It affects our personality. It affects our loved ones. It all comes down to control. And by the way, control works both ways. It's either lack of control or the over controlling of something. And it triggers into so many different emotions that are not necessarily a positive thing. And as human beings, it derails us.
Well, when you say control, is that the same as manifest? Do you believe that you can set your intention to something and achieve it with your willpower?
I think that's two different channels.
Okay, so control.
I think manifest is just about your aspirations. And I love that. I not necessarily by design. I mean, I look back at my childhood and I'm like, I always kind of thought that's what I want to do. I think we have to have dreams. That's sort of the engine that keeps pushing us. But I think control is, having things happen in a different way that you had imagined. Oh. And I think that creates a lot of inner complexities, including fear and anxiety and all sorts of negative emotions, just because, the results are different than what we want them to be.
Well, I think that's a great definition of control, because the more I've been researching and reading and getting deeper into spirituality, they talk a lot about how it's fears that we create our walls with, right? Because we think we're protecting ourselves, but we end up actually creating less opportunity for ourselves. And so sense. My goal this year is to go with the flow. I've been using that as my little mantra, just go with the flow, because I have a very controlling personality, and I developed it in childhood because I needed to. I had a hard childhood. And so I always thought it was something that was helping me. And it wasn't until recently that I started realizing how much I am not allowing opportunity to come into my life by over controlling things. So I'm so happy you brought that up, because I think that's a big part of whether or not we allow ourselves to be successful.
Well, I think part of us as human beings, and we all have it, by the way. If somebody says I don't have it, I think they're just, haven't looked too deep, But, I always say, like, we all have this invisible backpack that we carry around. And as we get older and we, go through life, we keep throwing more stuff in there. Mm-hmm. And we keep holding on to this stuff. And, that's when you get older, you just kind of shrink, and, because you're carrying all this, honestly, you're carrying all this invisible weight of stuff. And, if we have the ability to just unload this backpack and free ourselves from, and so much of it is stuff that we just it's just junk that we collect emotionally, emotional junk.
My dad had a saying. He said that life is a long walk across a hot desert. So be careful what you carry with you. He's like, set it down.
Yeah.
It's going to make your path longer and hotter. Well, I definitely want to talk more about your projects, but I do want to go back because you've referenced it a couple of times, and you had a very successful career before you got into real estate development. You were the executive vice president of Gotcha, which I remember that brand.
Yeah,
that
I love
is
that
a
brand.
very cool brand.
Yeah, very cool.
And not a lot of people know that you were the president of Quiksilver.
Yes, well, that was
kind of a mega brand.
Long time ago, yeah.
Yeah. So, and before that, couture. You worked in the couture industry. Did you say Charles James?
Yes. Wow.
In New York. My God, man.
Scary.
That's big stuff. Well, and I love the fashion industry. And it's interesting because they seem so very unrelated, but obviously you managed to figure out a way that they kind of strung together. Do you miss the world of fashion?
Not really. I honestly don't. And the reason I'm so firm about this, like, I wouldn't go back into it. It's not where I would say, oh God, I want to do that again. I had a amazing opportunity, amazing career. I moved to Brooklyn, New York back in the 70s from Michigan to go to school. And back then, quite honestly, see, people, I have this conversation with my kids. I drove them around the country and, do you like this school? And do you like this culture? And what do you think? Do you think you fit in here? Like, we didn't have any of those opportunities. I didn't even know what this campus looked like.
Yeah.
There was no internet. So I think you're doing things through mail. And, it was literally rated the #1 school in America for art, design, architecture, engineering, and industrial design. And so I applied for it.
This, of course, is Pratt University.
This is at Pratt Institute. And I thought, okay, it's in Brooklyn, but I didn't know enough about Brooklyn, quite honestly. And
if you did, you probably wouldn't have gone. Just kidding.
And I got accepted, and my, buddy from Catholic school just, hey, I'll drive you out. I mean, we didn't fly around back then. So we took his Oldsmobile and he drove me to Brooklyn, and I showed up and I'm just like, holy shit, this place is rough.
A little different than the Midwest, huh?
It was so hard in the 70s, but there was no going back. You can't call your parents. And by the way, my parents were extremely conservative. Everybody in my family is an educator, or they're a doctor, and when I told my dad I'm going to art school, I wouldn't tell you what he thought. He was very, very conservative. Like, they just thought I'd lost my mind.
Yeah.
He basically said, are you gay? I mean, that was the mentality.
Oh,
I mean, God bless him. He was a great dad, but honestly, that's what he said. I mean, it was just, that's this notion that, as an artist, you'll never make money and you'll never have a family, and,
So how come that didn't stop you?
I was driven. When I grew up, I played music. So I thought I wanted to be a musician. And then at some point, the other guitar player in my band, his name is Bob Cameron, lives in Florida now.
Hey, Bob.
Was such an amazing guitar player. And at some point I realized I'm not sure if I ever will be good enough. And then I'm not really sure if I want to play in these venues the rest of my life. I think it was fun at the time. And I think reality hit in.
It's a hard life.
But I wanted to be in a creative field. And I just thought going to design school I just felt it. I didn't have any logic behind it. And again, my family, my mom was always supportive, but, my dad was, he was definitely
not happy with
pretty hard about it. Yeah. But I did it. And then again, once I was in New York, I probably learned more being in Manhattan or in Brooklyn and Manhattan back then, because, it was, Halston and Studio 54 and the Andy Warhol. And I mean, it was really good.
Yeah, exciting times.
Again, at the time, we think about the music that happened in the 70s, and then you think about New York, and it was like, there was from music to art, it was just over the top.
Yeah, fashion was on fire.
And I think, I was 19, so it took a lot of self-discipline, to be honest. And I think that's where your background and your family and all that kicks in, because, you could easily have lost yourself, because there was so much cool stuff going on. But I became a couturier. So I designed $10,000 dresses, which is hard to believe at this point. And then I worked on 7th Avenue, the building that I worked for a designer named John Anthony, very creative. And, next floor down was Oscar de la Renta, and one floor up was Bill Blass. And, oh my gosh, all these names, I think Stephen Burrows was in that building. Calvin Klein was just literally 2 buildings over. Jeffrey Bean, he was in the same building. So I would run into these guys on the elevator. And for me, as a, sort of a young designer, it was like, holy Maloney. And then I ended up getting a job offer from Emmanuel Ungaro to work on his couture collection in Paris.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I still have the letter, should probably frame it. And I did not have a green card at the time. I was still, because my family came here as students. So, and I just applied, and part of the law then, I think it still exists, is, once you apply, you can't leave the country. And I was just crushed.
Oh.
And I'm just wondering where things would have gone. But I ended up working for really an amazing nutcase designer named Charles James. And you should probably look him up. He's got permanent collection in the Brooklyn Museum, but he was also really featured in the Met exhibition that happened here just a couple of years ago. He was definitely one of the most influential people I've ever connected with. And he was kind of a nutty guy. He worked from 7, his work started at 7 in the evening, and he worked till 2 or 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
And of course, I was still going to school, so I had to wake up at 8 and go to school by 9. But
so what you're saying is students can go to school and work at the same time?
Well, I did. I was so driven,
Yeah.
and so I just knew, like, this guy's not going to be around forever. So I just sort of just went for it. And it wasn't about the money, because he, barely got paid. He was not a wealthy guy. He worked out of the Chelsea building, which is an iconic building. I think Sid Vicious is OD'd there, and Bob Dylan used to hang out there, and Janis Joplin. It was like the craziest. You should look it up. The history is fascinating. But again, when you're living through all this, you're not thinking all of this stuff is going to become iconic. You're just thinking that's just the way it is. It's kind of like us listening to Jimi Hendrix now.
Yeah.
I'm just going, oh my gosh, why didn't I go to more concerts? But
so what did you learn from that time, though? What did you take away from that helped to fuel you and your success later?
Well, I learned that I didn't want to be a couturier, because it was such a, I don't know if it was realistic. It was, it's funny because I just watched the latest Halston documentary, and I feel like I was there, things got a little crazy in New York, I think, with the creative force. And I wanted to be I was a little bit more interested in the masses, as opposed to, just being in couture. And
Isn't that interesting how you've come full circle now?
Yeah. I really was interested but I got the New York Designers Award back then, which was a big deal. And then I got a bunch of job offers. And one of the offers was working for Janssen Sportswear, which VF Corporation ended up buying out of California. We had an office downtown LA it's in the beautiful blue building corner of 9th and Broadway, which is a side story. It's my office had 2 balconies. It's on the 10th floor, and somebody bought this building and converted it into a condominium project. And Johnny Depp bought that whole floor. So my office was literally Johnny Depp's apartment later on. And if I could afford it, I would like to buy it just for history sense. But he just sold it a few years ago. But it was so funny. But I worked downtown LA, and then I got involved.
So is that how you came to California originally?
That's how I came to California.
Okay.
I did a very small stint with Catalina, which was the original swimwear, and then I wanted to do menswear.
Didn't VF buy Catalina too?
No, VF bought JanSport and Janssen, and a bunch of other, and I spent almost 10 years there, and my office was actually in Hong Kong. So I got into manufacturing overseas very early on, just because nobody else wanted to do it. I mean, that was the mentality. Like, I don't want to go to Hong Kong, but I'll go, because I was always fascinated by culture. And 2 weeks into the job, I was on a Pan Am flight to Tokyo, and I got off the plane, and I absolutely fell in love with the Japanese culture. I don't know what it was, like the food, the way they presented things, and the merchandise, and the people, and the culture, and then it never stopped. And so, for about 10 years, I went back and forth. I had an office in the Tsimshatsui area of Hong Kong, and this is pre-1997, and Hong Kong was so dynamic, and really sort of became the expert on doing international business back then. So, and then I moved on to Gotcha Sportswear, and then finished off at Quiksilver.
That's incredible. Wow, what a long run history. One of my wish list interviewer guests would be Bob McKnight. Maybe you can help me.
Oh yeah, sure. Bob's got a great story.
Yeah. Well, Carrie Hayden, one of our other interviewers, is also friends with him because he.
Oh, nice.
Represented.
Yeah, I'm sure he'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, I would love to. Okay, so we do a little thing here called the big questions.
You mean those were all little questions before?
Yeah, those were all the little ones. We got the big ones coming now. Do you have any consistent daily routines?
I actually do. Yes, I do. Yeah.
Tell me about them.
Well, they're nothing necessarily sophisticated, but I used to be a runner, and at some point it didn't feel good. So I'm a pretty avid cyclist. So I cycle 5 days a week, and then I have a trainer twice a week. But I kind of found my rhythm with cycling, because it's.
Are you doing the Peloton?
No, I actually have a mountain bike that I take out, and it's just like a multi-level of satisfaction for me. Obviously, I get the exercise because I need it because I'm a foodie and a whiny. But I listen to lots of books because I don't really get a chance to sit and read. And so I've gone through some really very inspiring stuff. And then I write music. I'm still a musician. I have an album coming out in the next few months, hopefully.
I think that's the answer to my next question. What would people be surprised to know about you? You're a musician and producing an album of your own music?
Well, I'm a musician from years back. And then when we had our kids, honestly, I don't think I even played the guitar for 20 years. It just sat in the corner of my room. And
sounds like people I know.
Yeah. So it just, life happens, right? And your focus. And honestly, like 5 years ago, I just picked it up, and I was a little bit bored because I feel like I wasn't growing on the instrument. But, over the years, I've learned the piano, I played the harmonica, but I was at the Laguna guitar shop, one of my favorite places, and I
super cute
found a mandolin, and I just decided to go play with this thing, and I fell in love with this instrument. So I traveled around the world with it, and and then I picked up an octave mandolin.
Instrument.
So the album is really more about world music, and really excited. So another positive thing about COVID is I was working out of the home office and wrote a lot of great music, and some.
So do you write the music and the lyrics?
I play the instruments, write the music, and I do the lyrics, but I don't sing. Yeah. And,
so who do you have singing?
Well, I have a young lady that sang on 2 tracks, and I'm looking for a male singer, if anybody knows, that's got sort of a raspy voice, because I think some of the music really needs a male singer. Maybe our videographer here can help me.
Yes, well, we're good at networking on this show, so I have a feeling we might be able to help you.
Yeah, need some help.
That's awesome. I love that. So tell me, what books have influenced you the most? Sounds like you're reading a lot of them or listening to a lot of them.
Yeah, I do actually. I go through a lot of books. I would say my favorite book last year was The Untethered Soul.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I just love that book.
Love that book.
So I actually went through it a few times, and it's funny. The second time I went through it, the first time, obviously, I was so influenced that I thought, I got to do this again. And then a couple of months later, I went through it again. I'm like, God, I don't remember that. So it's just, I think, it's worth.
Yeah, well, that's a lot about
2 or 3
setting
reads.
your intention and manifesting. Right?
Yeah, there's something nice about the way the writer-singer puts it out. My favorite book this year would be the 21 Rules for the 21st Century. It's by an Israeli author named Hari. And man, I think that the book just kind of blew me away. It's one of those books where you just sort of can't put it down. Or again, I listened to it cycling. I was like, I can't wait to go on and write so I can go to another couple of chapters. Like,
That's
it was
great.
phenomenal.
What's it
yeah.
about?
It's just about life and how things happen and how we, stuff we've done with it in our world and in life. But it has
Is it more of a cultural book or more of like
I think it's cultural,
spiritual, inspirational book?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both,
Okay.
but it just kind of looks at us.
Yeah. Oh, you and I have the same type of reading habits. I love that. What do you think is the purpose of life? Why are we here?
I'm trying to figure it out. I don't know. I don't really, I'd love to give you some exotic answer, but I think that obviously every one of us think about that. But, I have this sort of inner philosophy that's helped me navigate. It's actually a question for you. I know you're supposed to be asking the question. So I feel like I am convinced that the solution to everything and the cure for everything is in front of us, except as human beings, we haven't evolved enough to recognize it. As an example, I think the cure to cancer is probably in some plant. Mm-hmm. Or in some shift in the environment, or, I think that's the cure for it.
Yep.
We just got to get to it. We spend a lot of time in terms of preventative, or, once you have cancer, okay, now you can go get chemo. But we don't spend enough time understanding the cause. I think if we can, and I'm just using cancer as an example. Yeah. And I feel like God has laid all this out for us. It's kind of like a scavenger hunt where we just got to go find it. So part of the mission in life is just being able to explore these things. And then every one of us, without a doubt, gets so bogged down by life and everyday routines or tradition, and that we don't allow ourselves the full potential of exploring these things, okay? And I feel that there's one thing, not even one and a half, that God left out of the equation. Everything else he gave us the answer for. And if we don't have the answer today, I think we will get the answer. We just got to loosen up and go find it. And do you know what that is? One thing that would change the entire way of how we as human beings would live, make decisions on, treat each other, humanity.
I think my big aha moment is this understanding that we have the ability to create the effects that we want in our life. I think the big change in my life is the understanding that you don't have to react, but that you can direct, and that thought is creative.
But that's a action and not necessarily the answer. And you know what I'm saying?
What's the answer, man?
God gave us everything except the one thing that he left out is our expiration date. In other words, imagine when you're born and, Shaheen Sadeghi, born May 10, 1954, will expire 2021, September. Yeah. Now, how would you live your life different? I mean, that one piece of information, if every one of us knew, I think that would change the whole world.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Because we would treat people different.
Yeah.
We would value time and
Singer
value
talks
relationships.
About that in Untethered Soul.
And value, I don't remember him talking about that, but I don't doubt it. But it just would, if you knew I have 3 more months, I have 3 more weeks, I have 3 more years, I have 10 more years, how would you live?
Yeah.
And we would live different.
Yeah.
And it would sort of be a cleanser in a sense in terms of all of this preconceived notion and all of these things, these emotional reactions that become our operating system. I think it would just solve all of that.
Yeah,
That's the thing. So the thing that drives me, without getting too emotional is, hey man, what if I just had 2 more weeks? What should I be doing right now? And that's why, when you ask me about projects, and I mean, I don't really sit back there and think, I'm going to do this 5 years from now. Obviously, I do things like, hey, I think people are going to want this and nobody else is doing it. So I'm just going to take it on, But I don't necessarily try to plan too much after, beyond that.
I love that. As he described it in the book, Michael Singer, he said that it was our ability, that death is a gift. Because it's
he does. Yes. Yeah, that's in the final chapter, actually.
The final chapter.
Yeah, it's a gift, he says.
It's a gift because it gives us the ability to reflect on life.
Well, his whole thing was, don't be afraid of death, which is a little different than what I'm, kind of talking about, but I completely subscribe to his belief there. But, and interesting enough, it's, and this is another thing that's, kind of stuck in my mind since the 70s, is that, I feel, because, religion, I've studied and experienced different religions, but, I think that's where I get confused, is that I feel that life is a gift.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know when our expiration date is, but we do know that we're all going to go.
Right.
Okay. And if somebody says, I'm not going to go, then they're not living in a real...
I don't think anybody says that.
Yes. So then if we know, we don't know when, but we know it's temporary, what blows me away is, I always say, it's kind of like life is like being in this amazing resort, and most people wake up arguing and warring and, focusing on what floor they're on.
Mm-hmm. Or how many days left?
Yeah,
how many days left?
As
how many
opposed
days left?
to, and it's like, enjoy the ride,
Yeah.
It's just, don't worry about some of that stuff.
I love it. That's a great answer. I'm not even quite sure what the question was. That's a great answer. What do you think is the biggest issue facing the world today?
Well, I think this is sort of the dark side of things for me. I think it's humanity. We've made such progress, whether it's technology or medicine, and just look at the last 10 years, what's happened with tech. It's just unbelievable. And we take so much of it obviously for granted. But my point is, we've made so much progress as human beings. But then in terms of relationships and compassion and humanity, we've made very little progress. People fought over territory and religion back in the Persian Empire, where my background is, And we're still having the same battles. It's unbelievable. I remember in 1965, as an 11-year-old that moved to America. So America seemed like a very violent place. And soon after, our family arrived. And again, we didn't speak English. We were just trying to understand the culture. Martin Luther King happened. And for us, it was just so shocking. Like, I thought we came to America because, America had it all figured out. And I remember, honest to goodness, as a kid, I hope I don't miss the day, but I think it was 63 or 64 where John Kennedy was shot. We all sat in our living room in Iran watching this on TV. And everybody in the family, including my mom and dad, was crying. That's how much we love this country.
Mm-hmm.
We need to make progress with these things, Yeah. So I'm at a loss, to be honest, to have some of these conversations, and particularly what's happened in our country here just in the last year. Just the inequality. I think that's just been disappointing.
I agree. Yeah. Tell me a goal that you've yet to reach.
Honestly, I'm, again, very aware of my calendar. Again, I don't know when my calendar is going to expire, but I'm, my mom lives in Coronel Marsh. She's 90. I want to spend a lot of time with her. My kids all turned out awesome. They all have great jobs and they're clean and they're just contributors to the world. And I think, really, I think about simple things. Like I want to spend more time traveling. I've done over 110 countries and it's inspires me,
What is it about traveling that inspires you so much? Because I know that's really important to you.
I like to get entrenched in other cultures. I think I think this idea that you can pick yourself up and drop yourself somewhere else. And the more challenging, the better for me. Because we live in a beautiful place, as everybody will agree. I've lived in Laguna since the 80s and I still drive by Crystal Cove every day and I'm thinking, oh my, this is so beautiful. So it's not that I'm tired of this, but I do think culturally we got to feed ourselves. I don't know if there's enough culturally within my local environment to sort of satisfy the soul. So, and my kids, we made a sort of a hobby out of it. Ever since they were 4, we would go on these one-on-one trips. They've also done probably 110 countries, and we've done the North Pole, we've gone to the South Pole.
Gosh.
We went kayaking down the Amazon, we've done the Himalayas.
He's right up next to Mike Schroeder.
We even went to Mongolia, which was on my bucket a few years back. They hated it, but I thought there was not a whole lot there, but it was really just fantastic being there. So I think if you have the opportunity to drop yourself somewhere else, not only you gain appreciation for the life that you have, otherwise I think we get goofy and take things for granted. Mm-hmm. But every trip you come back with another chapter to the repertoire.
Yeah. Does it inspire your projects?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I remember back in the 80s, I spent a month with the Inca Indians in Machu Picchu before it became, one of the world wonders. And I remember, and honestly, like this influenced the lab for me. I remember there was when you're in the hills, there is no grocery stores per se, and there's small markets, and they usually happen like in Cusco, the main town. And I know things have changed since, but the way it all worked on a bartering system. So on Fridays, there would be a central market in the village. And if you're a core maker, you bring your core. And if you're a sweater maker, you bring your sweater. And if you're a hat maker, you bring your hat. And what was fascinating for me was that everybody wore their best outfits. Like all the girls just dressed up like they're going to the prom, and the guys just, dressed studly, just so it was like all of, and it was like the event of town, and so much happened, and it wasn't just about consumption or buying groceries or buying a new hat. It was about this human interaction and how it brought the entire village together, and that's where you met your girlfriend or your boyfriend or families got a chance. So it became this social. And it just influenced me so much. So, I looked forward for every Friday to go, like, let's go to the market. And like, that's happening, And I feel like we need some of that. And I know when I first worked on the lab, it was all about this place of gathering for like-minded people in a sense, So, that's just one example of I can really talk a lot about travel stories, but I won't bore you. But there's always something you bring back with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're running out of time, but I want you to tell us a little bit about the San Marcos project, because I know we talked about this and I think it's fascinating. So tell us what you got going on.
San Marcos is a cool city. It's a new city. It's got a young population, great university town. It's in the San Diego County. And I was looking for some large acreage, minimum of 10 acres. And here I think we have about 12. And so I believe the next generation of retail, everybody talks about retail being dead. Traditional retail is definitely not what it used to, and it's not going to come back the way it used to. It's not the matter of the economics or post-COVID. I think it's just done with. But what I do believe in is, and this is what drives me with projects, and this is a good example, is that the traditional distributor channels are changing. So, when I was growing up and when I was in the sort of fashion industry or in the action sports industry, we made the product and then we went to a trade show, and then we had the little stores and big stores come to the trade show and buy our product, and then we would ship it to them, and then they put it up on their system, and they put it on the floor, they advertise it, they sell it, customer comes in, and each time somebody would touch it, obviously the price would go up, everybody would have a markup from the manufacturing to the producer to the retailer, so forth. And today, I think all of that has changed. I think the internet has had such a profound shift in all markets, particularly in the retail segment, because as I talked about earlier about little American businesses and smaller companies, and that's where all the innovation is coming from. It did back then, I think, so even today, all the innovation comes in because younger entrepreneurial, they take greater risk. Where big companies get to the point, as I mentioned earlier, they get so big and goofy they can't take any risk. So it takes an Elon Musk to show up and tell us how to build an electric car when GM and Ford and Mercedes have had the market for 100 years. They couldn't figure it out. I mean, really. So I think that was a perfect example. And this guy didn't even go to design school. He didn't go to card school. He sold PayPal to finance it. So I think that's the type of generation we're talking about. And so what we're doing in San Marcos, we're building this Burning Man looking project. So we don't want it to be beige with red tile roofs, because this, the makers have to have an emotional relationship with the architecture. So you can't just put junk together. And
it's
so
going to have big sculptures outside.
Well, it's that would be nice.
I love big sculptures.
yeah. But I think I want it to be indigenous. I want to, because San Marcos actually, it's an original Indian American land. And so we've done some, we do a lot of archaeology before we do a project just to make sure to answer your questions about authenticity. So it's an indigenous village. And it's for people that are makers. So if you are, the guitar maker, you can make your guitars there. And if I want to buy a guitar, I want to buy it from a maker. I don't want to necessarily go buy it at the Guitar Center that's it's made in China. And I think you can. He makes his guitars there and he sells it, and then he does half of his business on the internet. He can ship it to Holland if somebody wants to buy it there. And then the other half is just this local operator that you can have a conversation with. So you're eliminating the traditional supply chain. And the idea is you bring enough of these makers together, then you have this maker village.
So how's that going to be different than the lab and the camp?
Well, again, the lab and the camp, we started off with the same. The idea was, there would be small retailers, for example. But they would still have to go to a trade show and buy. They weren't necessarily makers, And I think now it's really gone full circle, where the makers are becoming the retailers as well. Yeah. And then it's, it's kind of, imagine the Sawdust Festival on steroids, Okay, I want to watch a glass blower make me a beautiful vase and have the conversation with him as opposed to buying it from Pottery Barn. Yeah. And I think that's where I see things going. And by the way, that includes food, your coffee makers and your beer makers and, your organic food makers. So, and there's entertainment and education and classes.
Now, do I also understand that there's a residential element to this?
Yes. So we're pegged to do, I think we're up to about 110 units there as well. And the idea of the residential is also these are people that you can live there and you can also have your business there at the same time.
Well, I love the idea of a built-in marketplace where you got your consumers living right above your shop, which is awesome, right?
Yeah. And that's, again, without getting too philosophical, I think that just also, talks about how we think even residential is changing. I don't think people just want to buy a condo. They want to buy into the village or in the neighborhood. So we have to basically offer this multi-level experience, not just living experience or a retail experience. It has to be multi-level.
So my girlfriend was telling me that she just visited a community where there's no parking because I guess they're like no garages because they're trying to encourage people to be taking more public transportation or something. Is that something that you see coming down the pike? Are we getting rid of automobiles?
Well, that would be cool. I don't see it happening soon, but I do think that going back to COVID, one of the other good things that have happened here, I have, if you ask me what my biggest challenges as a developer is, probably Sacramento. I think, we're all dealing with these rules and regulations and codes that were literally written in the late 70s and the 80s. That's before we even had iPhones.
Yeah.
And so we're building 100 miles an hour on a platform that was regulated and the rules were written, 40 years ago.
Wow.
And that's scary. Like, to me, that just says we've made no progress. So I think part of the issue is just, and I'll give you a simple example, outdoor dining. Like, why is it so hard for us to have to fight for outdoor dining? I mean, we go to Europe, part of going to Paris is you get to sit in a cafe and watch it. We can't do it here. We have the best weather on the planet. We have the best topography. And we have the ocean.
I understand the thinking behind that.
Well, it's just, it's the fly.
Is that really what it is?
That's part of it. Like, if you build a kitchen, you can't have an open kitchen because of the fly rules. And, it's like, I don't know how many people have died from a freaking mosquito bite, So I think we're so over-regulated. And it's getting worse, to be honest. I'm so we're not very happy.
Would you run for governor?
Oh my, I don't know if I have it in me. Not, it's just.
I vote for you.
Yeah, well, I think it's a nice fantasy, but it takes a special person these days, I think, to run for government.
Sure does.
It really does.
You are so incredible to talk to, Shaeen.
Well, thank you.
Every conversation I have with you, I walk away just learning so much. Thank you so much for coming and being my guest.
My pleasure.
Today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. We'll have to have dinner next.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Delphine Circle. If you enjoyed the episode, please check out our last two. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm Delphine. Welcome to my circle.